When your product is so complicated that it really takes like the founder's touch to finish that thing off every time, not scalable. Yeah. When it's something that's simpler solution and maybe you partner with another fulfillment group that does the finishing touch, now you can scale.
All right, welcome back everybody to another episode of the Startup Junkies podcast. Thanks for tuning in from wherever and however you're tuning into us today. We're excited to do a virtual episode today. I've got co-hosts Jeff Amerine and Daniel Koonce. How's it going, guys?
Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's going well. It's my first virtual podcast. I'm excited.
All right. Welcome.
All right. And we've got our new friend guest, Todd Westra. Todd's a serial entrepreneur. He's got a lot of background experience in building things and helping other entrepreneurs, and we're going to get into it with him today. Todd, how's it going?
So good, guys. I'm so happy to be here with you.
We're happy to have you. So Todd, tell us a little bit about, before we jump into what you're working on, tell us a little bit about Todd.
Yeah, I mean, not much to know. I have 7 kids. I have been doing startups my whole life. Somehow I've been able to support my wife and kids, and I feel very blessed for that. I love my family. I'm the 8th of 9 kids. At a very young age, my parents didn't have a whole lot to make us feel like we were as hip and cool as all the other kids in the neighborhood. And so my mom said to me one day, well, if you really want those G.I. Joes, go earn some money and buy them, And it was G.I. Joes and Transformers, early 80s. And so my brother and I got a paper out, and I tell people that I learned everything I learned about business on my paper out because I had to go sell my neighbors on taking that paper. I had to add advertisements in there, get it prepped for fulfillment. I did the delivery, did the fulfillment. I had to collect money every month, and I had to pay an invoice as an 8-year-old. And I did this for 5 years. And I learned how business worked at a very young age. And I just thought, doesn't everybody know this? And it turns out people don't. So that's something unique. I've since learned that I could do business in almost any flavor that I like to be involved in, meaning, I've done things in the golf industry. I've done businesses in the audio video industry because I thought flat screens were super cool. And I've done outsourcing in the Philippines for about 17 years now. And lots of different things I wanted to do. I found a way to monetize a business to do things I thought were cool and fun.
And how's that led you to where you are today and what you're working on? We talked about the growth readiness and just how you kind of landed on that trajectory.
Totally. No, listen, I fell into this weird situation in 2015-16 where a buddy of mine started to do a B2B event in Salt Lake City, Utah. And we called it the Utah Business Games. And it was a large ping pong foosball tournament. And it was just a business networking thing. And first year there was 40 companies, 400 people. We doubled it the next year. The next year we did it again, and we had about 1,200 people and about 100 plus companies involved. And it was just a side thing, and it was just fun. But then we started taking that to, we actually invited one of Google's ping pong coaches, because yes, they do have ping pong coaches. And he came out to our event and is like, you got to do this in the Bay Area. And I learned really quickly, it led us into a relationship with Google on the side, just kind of like, this is weird. How do we I was running a call center in the Philippines and doing events with Google somehow. And what happened was we started getting adopted by Google directors as a team building leadership training program. And we called it playing with purpose. Sorry, my brain wasn't working there, but playing with purpose. And we would connect leadership principles or management principles to an activity game that we would introduce to them. And it became this really crazy, cool thing. And when COVID hit, I had since transitioned out of my call center and a lot of my offshore operations and was just doing full-time Google stuff because it was honestly, it was the funnest business I've ever started. And in 1 week in February of 2020, I lost about $3.5 million in revenue and said, what the crap am I going to do? What am I going to, how do I transition out of that? And so that was a big wake up call. And at that moment, I realized that I not only learned how to start and grow and exit companies, some great, some horrible, but experienced a lot of good and bad. How do I take what I've experienced and help translate that to a younger generation? Because I've got 7 kids. I've got some kids in their 20s. They're adulting. They're like figuring out what they're going to be when they grow up. And I was like, man, how do I teach them this without forcing them into the box of an entrepreneur? Because it's not for everybody. And a lot of times I question whether it's for me. I think we all do. But I don't know anything different at this point. So let me just see what happens. Started a podcast, interviewed 250 CEOs in 13 weeks, and really kind of freaked out at the fact that everyone shared almost the same story. What was your favorite part about growth and scaling? Oh, definitely my people, and definitely like seeing people adopt my product. Oh, well, what was the biggest challenge? Definitely my people, and like it always came back to the same 3 topics, which was, really my people, my processes, and my tools. How do I get them ready for growth? And that theme of getting them ready for growth became this recurring theme in my head. And I kept hearing it. And it was like, I just wasn't ready for growth. Launching was a different creature than scaling. And how do I transition from a fun launch environment to something that's sustainable, growing, and my product works, and all that kind of good stuff. So that's kind of how I fell into this thing, was purely by accident and purely as a brand play. And it's just kind of grown from there.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. You mentioned the challenges of growing a business and scaling our people, processes, and tools. I took a class at University of Arkansas, and one of the big issues that organizations have when changing is they never know the right time. Can you kind of touch on what do you think this is to maybe look towards growing and scaling?
Totally, man. That's a great question, because everyone thinks that they're in control of what's going on until all of a sudden they're not. And they're like, oh, crap. What am I going to do?
Until it's too late. And then you can't do anything.
Totally. And ironically, I was moving my son and his new wife down to Arizona about 2 years ago. And on the road trip, I won't say I was watching, but my daughter and I were watching a Netflix on Elon Musk and SpaceX. And I wasn't thinking much of it, but I kept watching these rockets take off, deploy something, and then land, right? And the action was either it exploded on the way up, or it delivered something into orbit and it kind of did this, what it was designed to do, right? And I couldn't get that image out of my head. And I thought, business is a lot like this rocket thing I'm watching. There's a totally separate exercise for launching a business as there is for growth and scaling. And it's that transition of letting go what got you into orbit and focusing on what needs to happen in orbit. And so ironically, I created this little theme of the orbit analysis, or understanding your orbit, and turn it into a growth readiness structure, meaning there's 4 stages of transitioning your rocket from what got you off the ground into what's going to take us where we actually want to go.
Yeah, and can you touch on what those 4 stages are?
100%. We're
getting free advice here. Free
dude, I'll give it away all day long, man. I'm giving this away because it's one thing to know what they are, and it's another thing to like actually try to execute. Mm-hmm. But I look at stage 1, and you can go check this out at Orbit. Just go to growthreadiness.com, and I've got the whole rocket analogy up there. But essentially, what we're talking about is stage 1 is really your it's like a systems check, and I look at a systems check like when a rocket's getting off the ground. First thing they do after it doesn't explode is they're like, okay, what's going on? where are we at? Is that thruster still going? Is this thing still happening? And so what we do is in stage one of our analysis and our transition is doing a systems check. Part of that is understanding, okay, to what end did we launch this thing? Like, what is our exit strategy? Do we have an exit strategy? Where's this thing going? Because I need to know, is this a 3-year flip the business? Or is this like, I want to have my kids work in this thing until they're 90? Or am I just going to let this thing fizzle when I want to retire? And none of them are wrong. There's lots of ways to exit a company and none of them are wrong. But if you have a strategy in play, you know how to shape the business, right? To get it out of there. And if you're not going towards a target, you're just going and who knows where you're going to end up, which is what most entrepreneurs do, right? So part of that we call the exit analysis. And then you've got this burnout transition where a lot of times when you launch, you're also launching with a lot of thrust that you're never going to need again. In other words, products that you launched with that you really aren't making you money, but it was like quick client acquisition. I need quick cash flow. I'm going to take it any way I can. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. And you guys all know how this goes. Every small business owner does this. Yeah, we can totally service that, and that. When it boils down to it, when you're in your systems check, you got to figure out of the 50 bajillion things we just launched with, what are the 5 best things? What are the 3 best products that are making us the most money right now? And which ones do we like to fulfill the most? And that is another stage of transition where it's like, I don't want to do that thing anymore. Even though we had tons of client acquisition there, that is not sustainable and I can't really build my business off that. So you burn them out, get rid of them. You've never seen the space shuttle holding onto that giant fuel tank and those 2 giant rockets after it gets into space, right? So waste of energy, not nimble, can't maneuver, can't do its thing. So there you go. Burnout transition and exit analysis. And then we got to focus on your guidance system, which is going to get you to the target, right? And by guidance system, we call this the mission, vision, values section. It sounds cliche, but it is so needed. Like you honestly can't unite. When you're a team of 5, you can unite behind anything. When you're a team of 50, you want people that unite in the mission of what you're trying to do, the vision of where you could potentially get to. And if you can't rally around a common mission, guess what happens? Your marketing team is off doing one thing, your sales team's doing something else, your product team is like way out in left field doing who knows what, and you're just spinning wheels. So the very first stage of systems check entails a guidance system. Like, do you have one? And if you did, is it still relevant? Is your transition, your burnout, is that working? Like, did you get rid of crap that you don't need to do anymore? And then ultimately, where are you going? What's your exit? What does it look like? And are we aimed there? You can be aimed at the totally wrong spot. And in the back of your head, you're thinking, yeah, dude, I totally want to sell this to somebody, but I don't know what I'm going to do now, because you're about 1 million miles away from someone who wanted to buy that thing, And so that stage one is, truthfully, it's a wake-up call for most people. And it's like, if you don't do a systems check after launch, you don't know if that thing's about to explode still. And once you see that, okay, we've got a clear direction, then you jump into stage 2. And so stage 2, and I'll just repeat the next 3, and then we could dive into the specifics. But stage 2 is what we call operational house cleaning. Now that we know where we're going, do you know how to read your financials? Is your tech stack like jacked up? Like, do you have 10 CRMs because everyone you hire brings their own stuff? And do you understand your team? Like, what roles do you need? So stage 2 is all about house cleaning, getting rid of the generalists, hiring the specialists. All that kind of play is strategically necessary. Stage 3 is the ICP. When you client profile correctly, you hit the right people. You're talking to the right people. And you and I, all four of us know that most businesses have a horrible time talking to the right person. And when they know the right person, they don't know what to tell them, right? For me, this is the funnest part. I absolutely love client profiling because everyone is taught right now, don't profile anybody. As a business owner, if you're not profiling somebody, you're going to get screwed, right? Yeah. And then the last stage is this, we call it operational repetition. And these are the three things that, this is the very top capsule of your rocket, right? Like this is the part that's actually designed to be deployed and be the sustaining growth factor in your business. And it's product, it's marketing, and sales. And when a business owner can focus on those three things, product, marketing, and sales, and they're not worrying about, are my teams aligned? And they're not worrying about, am I financially ready for this? And they're not worried about, all the other stuff we just talked about. Focusing on those three things are the repetition that they'll be focusing on until they exit the company. And so that, in my opinion, those 4 stages of transition are what guide people from a beautiful launch into a sustainable, exitable business at some point.
I love the way you describe that.
Thank you.
It's really a good analogy, and it's easy to understand. And within that, so you mean you describe the process that you would take someone through in an engagement. What are the snags? What are the sort of things that inhibit growth that you see?
Oh my gosh. Well, I got to tell you, it's growth readiness to me has become such a fun topic because I started my podcast back up about a year ago, and with the intention of like understanding that clearer. What are the snags keeping you from the growth that you, and also looking back, because a lot of our interview guests are in a 10 to $100 million revenue range. And it's like, okay, looking back, what was that key decision that triggered the most growth for you? And so asking that now a few hundred times, it's really fun because the answers do kind of vary depending on the business. But most of the time, it's still, the snags are still the people, processes, and tools. But what I've done now is I've taken the responses that I keep getting on the podcast and I've created this framework of growth readiness, meaning we got these 4 stages of launch transition. Inside of each one, there's 3 growth checkpoints. And these growth checkpoints act as either a growth enabler, which you score, you get a green light, and it's like, don't worry about that anymore. You kind of got that figured out, to a growth blocker. And then there's a stage in between of like, you could probably muscle your way through that, but figure it out. You know what I mean? And so what I find most frequently, and again, all 4 of us probably know this, when you interview someone about their business, whether it's a year old or 20 years old, more often than not, if they're still less than 10 million in revenue, they've got a growth blocker that is just, they don't want to face it. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to have to solve it. And they're just fine with 10 million in revenue, right? But if you look at them and say, holy crap, dude, if you would just do this thing, you'd be $100 million company, And what does that do to your exit? If you're a baby boomer and you've got a $5 million company and you've had that same thing for 10 years, 20, 30 years, what if you just faced that blocker, overcame it, and now revenue spikes, and then you exit, it becomes a huge, huge multiplier, which is fun for most people. I don't know.
What are some of those typical blockers that you see where people were, give a couple of examples.
All right. So one of the common ones is overhead and cash flow, right? Overhead and cash flow is not something they teach you in school. When you are coming up and starting a business and someone shows you your P&Ls for the first time and you're like, wait a second, we did this much revenue. Shouldn't we have this much profit? And you're like, oh, crap. I mean, I think that financial fluency is probably the biggest growth blocker for most people. And unless you come from a finance background, or maybe you've been an investor and you're now doing your own startup, like you don't know this stuff. And I would say the majority of business owners don't know this stuff. And so teaching you how to understand, even if you're not the bookkeeper and you're not the CPA, how to isolate your revenue so that it's protected. And I've got X% of all revenue I'm just going to put to taxes. X% I'm going to put to some profit. X% I'm going to put to, and then once you have your expense account set up, if your expenses exceed what you just allocated, time to start chopping stuff, whether that's employees or whether that's programs you're buying or whether it's software. Like financial fluency and understanding your burn rate and understanding how much burn time you've got, like it is critical. And most people fail.
Interestingly, without naming names, we just went through an exercise with this was a almost 20-year-old company that was at about 40 million.
Yeah.
It was three principal founders, but it was 75 people on the cap table.
Right.
And wow. There were elements of those three founders where in some ways they were treating some expenses like it was a 3-person company and not one where you had a fiduciary responsibility for 70 some. So, and that's all fine and good. I mean, they were returning money to the initial investors. It was good. But if you want to have something that scales, you got to think about how do we go from 8 or 9% net EBITDA to 15 or 20?
Totally.
How do we jack that top line up in a way that we're growing more on a venture scale pace? And it was a completely different mindset. I mean, there was stuff that they were spending money on that was like, why are you doing that? And they did it because they're in kind of a compliance oriented business where the inbound was great and they were very competent at delivering, but they weren't managing the financial side like you described at all.
Financial fluency is a big deal. It's a big deal. And I would dare to say there's probably not a company out there listening to this who couldn't look at their finances and look at their expenses and chop 10% off without even hesitating. There's just stuff that's there for no apparent reason. And you're like, I could cut 10% off and put that back into a safe place, you know?
Let me throw you another kind of a curveball. And this is one that we wrestle with in professional services businesses all the time.
Yeah.
So we're in a professional service business. And some people will say, we'll tell you, well, it's a trust-based business. And trust-based businesses are incredibly difficult to scale, right? A lot of times it can be the cult of personality of the founders, and it's just difficult. It's difficult to get into new geography because you have to have new relationships, et cetera. When you have clients that are in that sort of trust-based business, a professional service business, do the same rules apply? How do you think?
I 100% agree that it applies. One of the things that I see in a trust-based business that's the hardest thing for them to scale is the fact that they're overcomplicating their deliverable and they're not niche enough. And when you have a specific niche, like if you've got, say, you're servicing 100 clients and you're doing well and you're generating good revenue, of the 100 clients, who are the 10 that you absolutely love to work with? And who are the 10 that you would love to do without? And it's client profiling. It's such a client profiling thing, and it's also a deliverable thing. So you got product and you got ICP. And when your product is so complicated that it really takes like the founder's touch to finish that thing off every time, not scalable. Yeah. When it's something that's simpler solution, and maybe you partner with another fulfillment group that does the finishing touch, now you can scale. And so even in a service-based business, it's, am I niche enough? Do I know exactly what these guys need? And do I want to service this group anymore? All of a sudden you can, and you can be more efficient with it, and you can not overpromise and underdeliver, but rather say, we're modifying our product a little bit. This is what we're doing now. A new client acquisition, we're not offering these 3 or 4 things that take the most of our time. And so I think even in a service-based business, if people just got a little bit less emotionally connected to their deliverable and more financially motivated to say, dude, if we just cut this thing off, maybe we discount our price, but I guarantee you our fulfillment's so much easier. Everyone's going to be happy because we know we do these things. These 7 out of 10 things are perfect. These 3, work out sometimes, but not all the time. Let's cut those out and just stick to the 7.
And I love that. A lot of times we'll talk about what can we do that is relatively low input, low input in terms of labor and material, whatever it may be, and extremely high impact. Let's do more of that. And it sounds way easier to say it than to actually do it. But I'll give you one analogy, which I think speaks to your point. This is actually a student team at the University of Arkansas that I coached some years back. And part of that class was, you've got to create a product within 16 weeks and go out and sell it. Here's some tools, here's some functions. You're going to go do this.
That's awesome.
This particular kid had access to some pretty solid woodworking gear. And he could do these really great state of Arkansas shaped laminated cutting boards.
Yeah.
Each one of them would take 4 hours to do, right? 4 hours. So you could sell it for like $90. Great. What he figured out as he went along, because he had a limited amount of time to turn a profit, was he could put 15 minutes into coming up with a flat Christmas ornament with something, scribed on it, and sell that. It was like 15 minutes to do and less material, and he could sell it for $20. So I said, well, it's not a linear programming problem. You don't have to be an industrial engineer. Do more, right? You can sell a ton of those.
100%.
Lower friction point on sales, less input. So I think your point is really well taken there.
Thank you. And I got to say, service-based businesses especially, a place where they miss a lot, they leave a lot of money on the table is through their customer success team. And what I mean is, oftentimes, to the previous point, you don't want to offer more solutions, but you can offer more solutions through other partners. And I think that customer success in a service-based organization means to me that if you are able to convert one of your existing clients to a fulfillment partner that does an ancillary product that complements you, and somehow arrange an affiliate arrangement with them, it's just money on the table that you're not leveraging, that you don't even have to fulfill. And that's part of your business model, and it's part of customer success, in my opinion. And so I feel like that's another big mistake a lot of people make is just not leveraging relationships. Sometimes they feel like they have to be just doing it out of goodwill. You don't have to. Like, it can be something you make money on too.
That's great. Daniel, Caleb, jump in there. Don't let me dominate all the airtime.
Yeah, I'm going to take a step back. You've mentioned just exit strategies a lot.
Yeah.
And something that's super interesting. I'm an intern here at Startup Junkies, so I'm constantly learning. And that's something I just never have thought about. After stalking your LinkedIn before this, saw that you've grown 4 businesses to adulthood and eventually to exit. Did you have an exit strategy for all of those?
No. Oh, good question. Oh my gosh, I love it. Let me share with you an exit nightmare that made me realize how important this is. I had a business right out of college that I had my wife and a new baby, and we were starting this audio video company, and super fun. Honestly, started with a partner, and we both were very entrepreneurial. And what we recognized is that about a year or two, probably 2 years into the business, we really had kind of outgrown the need of each other. It was a high touch point service offering. He did his parts, I did my parts. It was a really cool business. And at the end of the day, we're 10 years, about 10 years into the business, and we both were kind of tired of it. Like, we talked about exiting. We didn't have a real strategy, but we talked about it. And at one point, I had a client experience where, again, very high end, high touch point business. I had a client fly into Park City and say, "Todd, it's Thanksgiving Day, and my guest master bathroom TV is not switching to the right input." And I'm like, "Okay, your guest master bathroom TV in the bathroom is not switching." I was like, "Okay, well, I can tell you right now, all you got to do is unplug the TV and plug it back in. It's just electronics need refreshing. I know I've tested that TV. I know it works. It's sending the right command. Probably just needs a reboot." He's like, "Okay, when are you going to be here?" And I was like, it's Thanksgiving Day. How about a big screw you? Because I've got family too, and I've got people I want to be with. And he's like, Todd, you realize how much money I still owe you, on the finish of this job. Do you want that, or do you want to not see that? And I was like, you got to be kidding me. So I drove up there, literally unplugged it, plugged it in, was out in 5 minutes. And I am not a swearing man, but in my head was thinking, you sucker. I cannot believe you just took me away from my family just to do that. And so I left. I came back home. I called my partner on the way down. I'm like, dude, let's get out of this. I'm so sick of being the slave to these types of clients. And at the end of the day, he was like, well, if you're selling, I'm buying. And I just was so naive, so stupid. We put everything, we owned real estate. We owned a bunch of things. We kind of just made a break, and not saying that I got taken advantage of, but I was stupid. I did not know how to think about that exit. And I walked away with so little of what I had built. And 3 years later, he retires, and I'm like, awesome. I am stupid. It's not his fault. It was completely my ignorance that made the exit so horrible. And I really believe that when partners especially will talk about their exit from the very start of the business and think about, okay, what would be a cool way to go? What are 3 cool ways to exit this business? Not just one. And then have it actually planned where you can talk to an attorney long ahead of time about, okay, if you sell, here's your buy-sell agreement format that you can be thinking about. If you do this, then that. And if you do this and that, you can pay people to do that for you and not put yourself in such a vulnerable position that I was in of, I didn't even have to leave. It was really stupid. Like all parts of it were just stupid. But yeah, I've since gotten smarter, and I've done smarter things in my exits. And anyway, I was so mad that I just was naive and in a hurry.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I get to learn the importance of an exit strategy through your experience. And
you're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you for that.
No, it's a nightmare.
Your point about, it's a cliche thing, but I've often heard start with the end in mind.
For sure.
And it's a simple thing to keep saying over and over again. You start with the end in mind. What does it look like in the end game? What does winning look like 5-10 years out? It's really good advice.
And I hear people on my podcast that do it, and they're like, I literally started this business because I knew that this company over here would buy it because they don't have the time to build that. You know what I mean? And it's like, wait, you built that for a 3-year play and then exit? And he's like, yeah. And it worked. And this is the 3rd time I've done it. And I'm like, that's smart.
So Todd, one of the ways that we like to land a plane, so to speak, is we ask a bit of a time machine question. If you could take all that accumulated wisdom, all the things you've learned, the stuff that you put together with your new offering and your new business, all that, and you could go back 10, 15, 20 years in your career, what would you tell your younger self?
I would tell myself to take my growth readiness assessment. I honestly, that's why I built this. I have, again, 7 kids. I got my 4th just graduated from high school. And as I watch these guys enter into the realm of, do I want to start a business? Do I want to go get a job? Do I want to go to school? I want them to know that it does kind of suck. Like starting a business is really not awesome most of the time. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of pain. It's a lot of anguish with occasional bursts of like, ooh, those guys are going to work today and I'm not, type of feelings. And I think that as we, I would say go take the assessment and figure out what you don't know. Because if you relate to items in the 12 checkpoints that are easy to overcome, and you can go read a book, or you can go take a course, or you can go get a consultant that will help you through that. Oh my gosh, don't waste time trying to think you got to figure everything out on your own, because most people don't. I think that's the biggest advice is you're never going to know everything.
Right.
But know what the things are that you don't know, because Otherwise, they come back and bite you.
Oh, that's excellent. And where can our audience find out more about your offerings, about you? What's the best way for them to connect?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much everywhere at Todd Westra on social and stuff like that, but also growthreadiness.com. Literally, growthreadiness.com gives you access to a free, it's always free assessment that you can take and just identify what are the 12 checkpoints for you. And of those, which one are you strong and which ones are you kind of okay? And which ones should you really be thinking about? And then that's how you get into our world. Because from there, we've got a workshop, we've got intensives we do with your team, and it's just a lot of fun.
And thanks for doing what you do. And thanks a whole lot for coming on with us today. This was excellent.
Appreciate you having me.
Ecosystem builders, entrepreneurs, chambers of commerce, mayors, if you're interested in taking your economic future into your own hands, we've got a book that can help you. Creating Startup Junkies, Building Sustainable Venture Ecosystems in Unexpected Places is the guide. It's a little bit inspiration. It's a little bit toolkit. What it will allow you to do is take your economic future into your own hands and build a sustainable small business, innovation, and entrepreneurial ecosystem in your backyard. If you'd like to hear more, check out creatingstartupjunkies.com. The Startup Junkie podcast reaches over 100 countries and has had over 100,000 downloads. If you're interested in reaching some of the most motivated and engaged innovators and entrepreneurs on a worldwide basis, give us a shout.